everyone for joining in this kind of the holiday season. I am Melli Annamalai. I been a long time volunteer with Asha, primarily volunteering with Asha Boston, spent some time in the Asha-wide court team as well a while back. So I thought of this topic because recently there were some discussions about the chapter about when Asha can withdraw and all of that. And I just thought, oh, okay, maybe we should really look at, kind of try to summarize at least my experiences. I don't claim this to be a scientific study of sustainability. It's more anecdotal experiences based on projects I have been involved with in some fashion. But I thought still there's enough material here to kind of have a good discussion. So sustainability is like a favorite theme, well, our understandable reasons, because we don't want to be supporting a project forever. So when I think Asha first began in I think the 90s, I joined like in the late 90s, 98, 99. So at that time, we used to have a lot of these discussions around, oh, we had to withdraw in a few years, we had to withdraw in 3 years. 3 years was a popular number because we don't want to just keep supporting a project forever. And if you intervene for 3 years, then I think they can be on their own. So over years, what we have learned from all of this sustainability, so I now try to separate that into financial sustainability, which is what we were talking about at that time, which I define as the ability for the donor agency to withdraw. So like I was saying, Asha was saying after 3 years, we should be able to withdraw. So that's financial sustainability, meaning the school can continue to run, the NGO can continue to run the school or the educational activity without support from Asha. And what happens, how can that be done, right? What we have, I think what I have found at least in my tenure in Asha is that early on we had a lot of push towards help the NGO start a business, sell products, sell palm leaf products, sell embroidery products, like if it's a project in UP, sell palm leaf project if it's a project in Lucknow, use some local skill and help them generate funds, like the parents of the children maybe can try to sell some products and so on and so forth. I have seen extremely few examples of success this way. And finally, the simple reason is NGOs are not good business people. They're there because they want to run schools or run other, or do other social economic development activities. Running a business is a different thing. I mean, in the UP case, when we tried to have embroidery centers, there was a competitor in the area who basically mercilessly undercut the project. He would keep this reducing his prices until he drove us, meaning the NGO, out of the market. So it's very hard to do this. I mean, I recently tried to have the Asha bags, like shopping bags, made by a project, shipped to the US to see whether we can sell them here with all the interest in the environment and reducing of plastic. I thought we can create a market for these bags. But I think Asha, like other NGOs, is not really equipped to start a business. I mean, we are not successful at that. So the only NGO, and I could be wrong here, like I said, all of my experiences here are anecdotal. The one example I've seen where the NGO successfully started a business is Jeevan Gyanodaya, which used to be a Boston project, then became an Asha Seattle project. And I believe he built a wedding hall. And that wedding hall is now generating enough income for him to sustain the school. That is a school for children with hearing and speech impairment. So, you kind of always need, I think you kind of always need support for that. I don't think the requirement for support is going to go away. But he's able to sustain that based on the wedding hall that he's created, which again led me to think that maybe that's an option, right? Like you invest in property. See, property always goes up in India. Invest in property, invest in a building, rent out that building, especially in cities. This can be a path to some kind of revenue if you're able to build a building and rent it out. which is a little different from starting a business. So the other thing where we had some success is finding other funding sources. In Boston, we've been somewhat reasonably successful in terms of finding other funding agencies. It could be anything like aid or something larger, or typically now corporate grants. So the corporations in India are required to spend 2% of their profits towards socioeconomic development activities in India. This includes companies registered outside India, like my employer Oracle is required, has an India office, so they're required to spend 2% of their profits in India for socioeconomic development efforts. And I think that is a huge thing we are trying to tap into. We should tap into more. I'm just bringing that up again in case you're not familiar with that. I think it's really important to tap into that. And then crowdsourcing. There are other ways of finding sources. Regarding the crowdsourcing, I think Asha Austin talked about how they are able to, just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I believe Asha Austin has some kind of a process in place where they are trying to say, after 3 years, we'll help you find funds. And I think crowdsourcing, like going into websites like CrowdTilt and so on, they're trying to raise funds for a project, help the project partner raise funds. So that's an option too. So anyway, so first 2 bullet points, I think we had reasonable success in helping raise funds, helping the NGO raise funds. The other way to do this is to create more wealth in the community so that the parents can pay fees. Like if you talk about an education center or a school, in a well-off community, the parents pay the fees. And it's because the parents cannot afford to pay the fees is why Asha exists and other NGOs exist. What would happen if you created more wealth in the community? And we've really not had that much success in that either, but we had, I guess, some. I just wanted to highlight some maybe successes we've had, like Timbuktu organic farming. I was kind of sort of peripherally involved in that as an investor. I believe they were able to have a sustainable organic business. I haven't really followed up after that. Then the fire, I just recently heard this last week that their cloth manufacturing business is doing well. At least it's self-sustaining, the business itself. Self-help groups, I think that's another way where you can generate income in the community. Asha Boston had tried this a while back. We had some, we didn't have much success actually. Again, I think the NGO was not a good businessman, but I recently came across another NGO which seems to be doing this well. So these are typically structured as cooperatives run by the community. So one expects that you have enough income to start paying fees. So I don't think we've really seen that yet. We're generating some income. So going back to the thing, the 3-year time frame, I think is a little unrealistic. But I totally understand why Asha feels they have to have it, because we don't know where we will be, whether we have enough volunteers, and so on. So it will be interesting to understand the Asha Austin model better. So beyond that, right, beyond financial sustainability, what is another aspect of sustainability? So when I first heard about this aspect of NGO withdrawing, I was kind of very excited about it, because to me it spoke to what this project should do. They don't just, they don't just worry about providing financial stability, but they also say, what can the community run its own schools? So for example, if you're talking about a rural remote village or a remote tribal hamlet, the reason that an NGO exists there to run a school is because the parents are first generation learners. The parents are probably have gone to primary school or not there, and the children are first generation learners. Does the community have the capacity to provide teachers? has a community that has the capacity to be administrators and run a school. So that to me seemed like such an exciting goal. Because once you build the capacity to manage a school, either run a school on their own or help them lobby the government to run the government schools better, then any NGO can withdraw. Forget Asha withdrawing for financial support. Any NGO can withdraw. And that, to me, should be the final goal, because you don't want to always having to help the educational efforts. So the question is, can you build capacity to do this? So I thought in the next couple of slides, I'll just go through 3 examples where this has been attempted in some fashion and see how far this has taken us. So the first example is running a DEd college. DEd is a diploma in education. So this is run by a project partner in Hestikote Taluk in Karnataka. The school itself, the tribal school itself that the NGO started, is literally in the middle of a forest, like it's in the forest area, for instance, the reserve, and they surround the school with electric fencing and all of that to ensure the wild animals don't come in, and it's literally in the middle of a forest. And right next to the school, in that hamlet, they started a DEd college. So the school serves the 4 tribes that live in the area. In various hamlets, it's a boarding school because it might be tough for children to come to school through the forest. So they said, okay, we'll start a DEd college. So we will create teachers from among the tribal community, itself. Then you don't have to worry about getting external teachers. That's step number 1. Because it is not easy for the NGO to get teachers from outside. And overall, this is a challenge. If you work with a rural project, I'm sure you have seen that as well. Finding quality teachers in rural areas is very tough. So you have to get them from outside. They might not want to go and teach. So then you have to pay. We have one project where they want to pay a higher salary to attract them and so on. But if you can build a capacity among the tribals themselves, then maybe we don't have to depend on teachers from the outside. That to me was very exciting. So this, I think we started this maybe 12 years ago, and I helped them get funding. I talked to various Asha chapters I said, this is such a cool idea. We had to create teachers from among the tribal community, so let's try this. So what has happened in the last 10 years? The school roughly graduates 20 to 25 students per year from DEd. So DEd is something you do. It used to be that you do this after class 10. It's a 2-year course, gives you a diploma in education. You can do it after class 10. Now I think the requirement is class 12. And you can, it's different from BEd. BEd is you go through undergraduate degree and then there's a 1-year education course. DEd teachers can teach up to class 7, class 1 to 7. Primary and upper primary. So this college, many of us have visited multiple times. San Diego, I know Parthiv and Amy were instrumental in starting the funding for this at the beginning, and many of them they visited, I have visited. So I think the college itself was run well. So 20 graduates per year for the last 10 years. This means around 200 graduates. So what happens is about 5 have been graduated by SUI and the project partner itself in the tribal school. And they also run another school for slightly wealthier farmers in the area. I don't know why more have not been absorbed, like why more have not been, as other people retired or left. I don't know why more, that's something I need to find out. But about 5 have been absorbed. 3 graduates started their own school, which at that time, which happened about 7-8 years ago, we were all excited about. I said, oh, okay, this is great, because they, in a nearby town, Hunsur, they said, okay, we're going to start our own school. I think that's running okay. And then the rest are contract teachers in government ashram schools. So that government runs tribal, what they call ashram schools for tribal children, which are residential schools from class 1 to 7. They're residential again because it's tough for the children to come through the forest. That's why they're called ashram schools. They're run by the tribal welfare department, which has its own problems, not by the education department. So they get less training and all of that. So what happens in the tribal ashram schools is there typically is one teacher who's also like the acting headmaster or headmistress, and everybody else is contract teachers. Good number of graduates have been absorbed as contract teachers. When I say good number, I believe it's like around about 50 or so. But the pay has been very low. So it's like about 5,000 rupees or 6,000 rupees a month. And the more challenging part is it comes really late. Like you'll get it in the 10th month for all months together. So it's really hard to kind of treat it as a real livelihood. But I think the teachers are there, and I think this is I want to see exactly what they're doing and kind of see how they've impacted the school, because now you do have teachers from a tribal background at this tribal ashram schools. So that was, I think, reasonably, I mean, that's a good thing, I guess, though with all of these other government problems. But the real challenge has been the government has done no hiring since the mid-90s. So not only are the tribal ashram schools, you have other government schools in this taluk, like Asha itself and the Mobile Science Fund project we support. We work with 90 government schools in the area. And I know for a fact that there are many vacancies in the schools. I know for a fact that there are some primary schools with no teacher for the whole year, for any teacher at all. But government has not done any hiring because of other budgetary and other reasons. So this is a real challenge. You have these graduates, you have these people ready to teach, but you don't have anybody hiring them, not enough people hiring them for decent, well-paying jobs, which will again help the economy because they would be well-paying jobs. And there's not much private school activity in the area, so there hasn't been much absorption of these graduates from there. So what has happened in this case, the teachers have left for cities. The people who didn't get a job locally, the graduates. And that has its own set of challenges because it's a tribal community. And you would know from if you work with a tribal project that tribals really, really don't like to move to the cities. I mean, they really like being with their own community rather than be in the mainstream society. They don't fit in there and they're unhappy. For example, they have more of a sharing culture. They're not used to saving money for a rainy day because they just help each other out. They're not able to just fit into the more competitive and very kind of more individualistic society. They really struggle with that. So the project partner, yeah.
I have a question. Would you like questions in between, or do you want us to save it till the end?
No, you will go in between. Give me a chance to sip water too. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So in the case of this particular college, I was curious to understand what was the reason that the government did not do any hiring, if it was, the typical lethargy that accompanies usual government processes. And if so, what has the NGO done, or how can we help the NGOs probably move the needle? Like if you have any thoughts to share, because this also goes into the whole theory of change conversation we had been having last year as to, if we've come this far, then how do we get them till the end goal?
That's an excellent question. And see, I don't know exactly why, and I've been trying to find this out myself. I don't know exactly why the government just decided not to hire. I mean, I think it is basically the budget is frozen at the state level. And then I think they just decide that, okay, we are not going to be funding any more teachers, which is completely stupid because you have all of these vacant positions that I know are there, right? So the second question is then, can you lobby the government to change this? And SVYM is a large project. It is one of the few projects that will be able, project partners will be able to pull this off. And that is where I'm trying to talk to them and say, okay, what can we do?
Okay.
What can we do to say yes? I don't have a good answer.
I have one question.
Yeah.
So who started this DED college in tribal area?
The project partner itself, SVYM. It's a large NGO in the area.
Oh, okay. But I mean, starting a DED college is a very involved task. I mean,
yeah.
So they lobbied the government and take the grants from the government to start the DED college, or it was fully private?
They had some grants from the, first of all, getting the license, I think, was a big effort. It was a big effort. And they might have gotten some funds. I think they did get some funds initially when they started. Otherwise, it's been predominantly funded by Asha San Diego and Titan.
Oh, okay. So with Asha's money, I mean, with Asha's help, they started the DED college. But to get the college running, I mean, they need teachers. So they brought the teachers from the outside?
Yeah.
Oh,
so SVYM in that sense, what they do is they run this on like the pay scale they provide is sort of government pay scale. So the pay scale is higher than a typical private school or private college. And so because of that, they're able to attract some people. So that's one thing. But they also began doing things like, which I think in the long run became detrimental to the project a little bit. So Sargur is a town. Which is at the base of the hills where the forest region starts. So they began busing teachers from Sargur. So they began giving options for teachers that you could stay in Sargur and take the bus to go to work every day. The students, the DED students would stay on campus. And I think that's okay, but I mean, like when you go to when they started the tribal school, like 30 years ago, the people who started were really dedicated. I mean, they would stay there and they would work so closely with the tribal. I think they didn't get that. When you start providing these conveniences, I think you ended up getting people who are maybe a little less committed to the cause and a little more coming because it was a job. So I think all of those things also played in a little bit. But anyway, in detailed terms, that's what happened here. They bus people from Sargur, so about an hour and a quarter bus ride from Sargur to this school.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, it was started, they could run, I mean, it is running right now, right?
It is running, but they're actually considering closing it right now in the next year or two.
Oh, okay.
Because of all of this, they're finding that the graduates are not able to find jobs, and that running the DED itself is a problem. And then the other challenges has been that, I think I have a bullet point on that. The other DED is losing status amongst people. This is like an orthogonal issue, nothing to do with the school or the project partner. Over 10 years, BEd is more prestigious than DED. Everybody wants to do a BEd. See, the government came in with a lot of schemes to make it easy for girls to take up and girls and boys to go into undergraduate degree. For example, in Tamil Nadu, if you finish your undergraduate degree, you will get half a sovereign of gold. So people have randomly go through all kinds of poor quality colleges just to get their undergraduate degree, and then they do a BEd. It's 1 year after that. So, I mean, for factors completely unrelated to the NGO, BEd has become kind of the bigger goal that people aim for than DEd. So getting students became a slight problem actually, and getting really good students. Hardly anybody wants to do a DEd now. Everyone is aiming for the BEd. So I asked them, can you upgrade to a BEd? I was kind of thinking that might not be a bad idea. But then in this particular taluk, there was not enough graduate colleges to provide this, to feed into this. So to provide enough graduates who will come and do a BEd here. So they're seriously considering closing at this point and changing the strategy a little, which was disappointing for me. So going back to the point Anu raised, right? This is what I also want to ask the people. I have been asking the people at SVYM, and they keep telling me Asha should get into lobbying. My SVYM tells me, So I want to tell them, why can't you lobby? And I think it's basically tough. I mean, I think they also don't know how to lobby for this. That's the conclusion I've come to. Nobody knows how exactly you can force the government to appoint teachers. Nobody knows. And then we're assuming the process is corruption-free and all of that. I mean, they might, who will get hired, all of those are issues. But how do you force the government to hire? I think even this large NGO doesn't know. I at least don't know. If anybody knows in Asha how to start, I'm all ears. So if you want to get into that, that's next step.
Yeah, because it's a really wonderful idea. And I am stewarding a project in the tribal area on the border of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. So it piqued my interest actually.
Right. I think it's a wonderful idea, right? You don't want to keep depending on outside. Yeah, you want to build that capacity from the community. But these are the challenges we are one under. I also don't know why the tribal school itself only absorbed 5 graduates. So recently I helped organize a site visit for Vidyodaya, a tribal school in Gudalur, Tamil Nadu, that Asha Colorado funds, I believe. And from what little I saw in that project, looks like number of teachers are actually from the tribal community over the last 20 years. They have become, over time, more and more tribal youth have become teachers in the school. So I don't know what the differences are between these schools. So I was separately thinking that the person I was able to get to visit Vidyodaya school, I want to have him visit this school also, the tribal school also. So we then do a comparison and see why that didn't work here in Karnataka and why that worked there. But there probably are other factors. But I agree. I think we should identify what are the good practices here and what is working in some places and then try to implement everywhere.
Yeah, and it is, I understand because tribal regions are very unreachable. So, having teachers coming from outside is very difficult and they have their unique set of problems. So if the community itself empowers and understands the need of the teachers, so it's a great idea actually if it works.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also the tribals don't want to leave. They really, you won't find this in all rural places. Many other rural, they're happy to leave the villages and go to the cities. I have left when I came to the US, right? I left my hometown and came. I'm not saying everybody doesn't want to leave, but tribals in particular don't want to leave. That's what my experience is. They're very unhappy.
Yeah.
So when they don't want to leave, then I think we really should make use of that human resource. So I agree. We shouldn't get disappointed that this didn't work. We should see how to make this work, right? What could we have done, or what can we do in other projects to make it work better?
Yes, definitely.
I think we should. That should be our focus. Yeah. And SUYM it's a pretty large NGO. If they cannot do it, I really have to go probe some more. I haven't gotten a clear response as to. I think they've tried. They do lobby. I think they're not able to do beyond this. I think the government hiring is a whole different thing. They're just not able to crack that. So,
just sharing from Danbury. This is our second cycle, but for a project in rural Odisha. It's called an Anandalaya. It's a school, but it's literally a hut where kids gather after school. So one of the requests we had was, as we started, was looking into exactly this issue of hiring local teachers. So too early to say, but we started off, increased it by, I remember 2 years ago, by 65%. So the acharyas, local high school graduates teaching these students, it seems to be happy so far. They're there, positive feedback, but yet to see, over the next handful of years where this goes.
Oh, that's an excellent point. It's a good segue to my next example here. And I think at the end of this, I'll come back to you with some questions on this.
Okay.
So this example, what I'm talking about is what I think has been tried in a couple of other projects, is to do what you said, is to say, let's hire teachers from the local community. And nowadays, again, there are more graduates. I mean, if the village might be overall a first generation village, but there will be a graduate or two in a nearby village or something. So what can we do to hire them? The challenges have been that they've typically gone through very, very, very poor educational institutions themselves. So they often don't know enough. I mean, they might have a degree on paper, but they might not know enough. So there are many stories, like you'll interview this, they will, and I'm not kidding, you will interview like a math graduate on paper and they won't know how to solve a basic linear equation. And I'm really not kidding. So they just memorize their way through college, so they won't know. So what can we do, right? So a couple of NGOs have taken this approach of they hire, obviously, they look for some spark when they hire. That you're really interested in doing something or in improving yourself and helping the community. They look for some spark. They don't look for the content itself, because that's very hard. That's usually uniformly low. So they look for some spark, and then they start providing good exposure on the side. And this is, I'm not training in the formal sense, really, right? I mean, that's one thing that, training methodologies. But sometimes I feel we are focused overly on the methodologies themselves. Methodologies are important, but I think first is the right attitude and understanding of the subject itself. Then the methodologies come later. So for the understanding of the subject itself, it's just an exposure to various different kinds of things. Anything from lectures on the topic of your area of study to everything, like not just math lectures if you're a math graduate, but anything on politics, anything, current politics, current events, books, literature. Have more and more discussions related events for teachers. Like I'll give you two specific examples. So Reward Trust, every month they run they call it a teacher exposure event or something. And every month it can be something different. Like let's say you're going to India, they will say, if you want to talk about what you do, by all means. Like I work in the IT industry, I work for Oracle. I can, for example, talk about the IT industry and a large, or more specifically that, okay, the IT industry is moving towards the cloud. What does it mean? I mean, obviously I have to relate it in some way to the teachers, but any topic of interest, right? To kind of tweak their curiosity and get them to learn, start thinking about problems on their own. That is what we're aiming for here. Because there's so much in the rote memorization bus that the ability to think and problem solve has effectively been completely buried. We are trying to expose that by just exposing them to different problems and how problems can be solved and how problems should be addressed. So Reward Trust, one of the projects they did was when a couple of years ago, you might remember that Chennai had lots of floods. And the theory was that a lot of the ponds had been emptied out and construction happened on it. So there was no way for the water to go, and the streams had been dammed up or blocked and so on. So they did a project on that, water management. And the fact that you can actually solve a problem by looking at these factors, reading books, talking to experts, this is actually quite mind-opening, and people really blossom when you start. But because I think the human mind is built to be curious, and when you just take away these layers of rote memorization, I think that natural curiosity bursts forth. So if you look at the Reward Trust teachers now, they're all very enthusiastic. After a while, they're like want to do things, and that's. So once they do that, then going from there to good teaching, I think is a simpler step. Yeah, I've done some teaching methodologies and so on, but you need to first make them into thinking and curious people themselves. So coming to your thing in Danbury, right? I am now curious about whether you have seen, whether you had this issue of hiring, whether you found the quality to be poor, whether you're able to find good people, and what kind of exposure you're giving them and so on.
So that's why I said it's a little too early to comment on that. This is a project we, because it's rural Odisha, we wanted to make sure we had somebody, from our local community here who can steward it. We do have, this is our second cycle, that's why I'm saying we need to wait, but at least from the site visit as well as what the project partner has communicated, it was pretty challenging to find teachers in there. So just no one to teach. I mean, students are there, but we can't find teachers, So
right.
Perhaps this is a starting point. It does look like it. It's a Keonjhar district, away from the main city, Bhubaneswar. So we'll see. We've had 2 sets of site visits done. We just disbursed based on, feedback. Site visit is working well. There is stability. Children are in there. They want us to actually now adopt another 10 cluster of schools, which we could potentially be doing next year.
I'd like to add to this a little bit through Asha Atlanta's experience. So we did something similar in Gujarat, in interior Gujarat, near the Run of Kutch area, a bunch of villages where NGO we were working with Gram Vikas Trust. And so they were trying to do something similar. They were trying to kill 2 birds with one shot, which was essentially there were a lot of vacancies in the government schools, and they were actively working with the block development officer. And so they decided to hire, through Asha's help, we were finding para teachers who are essentially substitute teachers. And who they are people from the local community who have had passed either a B.Ed or whatever, some basic degree, but couldn't get through the government hiring process, but were reasonably qualified. So we would pay their salaries, and to improve of teaching, what they did was they also, in parallel, had a Sikshana teacher training program. They would coach all these teachers. And so through a combination of these 2 efforts, they managed to see significant improvement. Not just, they were also hiring youth from the local community, but also, improving the quality of education.
Right. I think that's a good model. Yeah, right. That's a good model, and it is very similar to reward model in some way. Right? They basically add teachers to the schools. Yeah, and they do these programs on the side, and then
yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, but it also still goes against the fundamental grain of how we want to think about Asha as an organization, which is we were doing the government's job, and that was my fundamental gripe against. We still do, you got to look at the bigger picture and say, okay, either we don't support and then have these kids languish with no teachers, or we do a stopgap solution while still trying to lobby the BDO to push for hiring full-time teachers. So, in that sense, we still didn't solve the original problem.
Right. And in some sense, any Asha project we're doing we're doing work the government is not doing and should be doing. I mean, if the government system worked well, we wouldn't need Asha at all. But I completely agree with you that the lobbying, right? So if there's anybody has successfully lobbied, I think I would like to understand that model, how it really works and how they've been able to do that. And so other projects, at the block education officer, block development officer level, people are able to do it. But I think the hiring and the appointing teachers seems to come from a higher level. We need to understand that more.
That is
and
correct,
in the
yes.
In the Danbury case, so I think Danbury's also worked with Reward for a while, right? You can see what they've done.
No, it's amazing to see their pictures, their updates, the constant, teacher engagement. I just truly love what they do. Unfortunately, Melli, as we communicated, they have not closed it. It's still open. Would love to, it's still, let's see for the next quarter, what it looks like within our chapter. But if we do have some new donor committed for like a couple of teachers, we are still keeping that channel open just now.
Okay, the reason I mentioned that was I was thinking you could, for the projects in Orissa, I'm wondering whether some of those ideas of having teacher engagement, some of the concepts will be applicable in the Orissa project to have. I guess what I'm saying is having something for the teachers outside of the teaching engagements, I think helps.
Agreed.
That's where I'm
Agree.
going.
And I actually love this idea of, when we do our visits, just talking about what each one of us does here and pick one example of how we solved a problem. That is such an awesome idea. And I'm going to put this out to Ashok Panigrahi, who is our project steward for that region. I mean, the ones that I visit are in Hyderabad. It's a city. They're doing well. We have one in Mumbai. They're, again, trying to solve problems. But I think a little something like that from project stewards across all chapters, I think is a great idea. To be honest with you, I never even thought of something like that.
Right.
Just talking about
I encourage people to. I did that. I talk about places I visit to. Like I recently went to Vietnam. We had a family vacation in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. I had pictures, and it's not a very deep thing, but I just shared my experiences of visiting Vietnam, and it's loved it because it's very different from actually talking to someone who's visited a place. I think I encourage every volunteer to do that.
Yeah. And the concept of a cloud, I mean, I don't know if people, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but if they don't, then it's like taking your thinking to, there's no limit, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. This exposure.
Yeah.
So the third example I wanted to talk about was support from old students. And this we're beginning to see in projects where we have worked for the last 10, 15 years. So we've been lucky in the Boston chapter in many ways. We have some projects we worked with for many, many years, and some we've still been able to take on new projects every so often. I know there has been a lot of discussion around how long can you work with a project. I personally am a believer of being in with a project partner in the long haul, simply because education itself is like a one generation activity at least. I mean, it's at least 15 years, and it takes a generation to see any impact. So I think 15 years at least, I just, like I said, my personal belief. And Boston, we've been lucky. It's been a relatively stable chapter. We've been able to do that. So how can old students help, right? They can come back to the village or to the rural area as teachers. They can get hired as teachers. They can financially contribute. They can be role models. So all of these are great things. And in some rural areas, it's not always easy for, I think, people do want to just migrate to cities, and not everyone wants to come back, but people do visit. They visit, and then where possible, we encourage them to, like we were just discussing, to talk about their experiences. How do they problem solve? What are they doing in the cities? And I think all of that also helps. The financial contribution, I had hoped to be more than it has been in the couple of projects we've been working for like 15 years now. There's some financial contribution, but what ends up happening is they end up coming from very poor families themselves. So they have a lot of family, they have to support themselves, like nieces, aunts, uncles, cousins, that they're putting to school. So they don't usually make a significant chunk, like they'll come for Diwali and they'll give 1,000 rupees, that type of thing. It's not like, okay, every year I'm going to give 20,000 rupees, which would be nice if they can afford it. Not obviously everyone can afford it, but one or two have really made it into really well-paying jobs in some projects. So I think they could afford it, but we're not seeing it that much. Maybe we should encourage it more. But in terms of sustainability, that is one way to sustain also. Whether the community has enough people that has graduated through this educational institution that they can come back and help support this. So with what I've seen, and Sahanivasa is one example where we have been working with them for over 15 years, and some old students have come back, and it actually provides employment because Sahanivasa also, it's a little bit, I guess, it's not really para teachers. They basically run supplemental centers. So supplemental evening centers for children going to government schools. So they hire teachers for that. And it used to be initially we were all hiring teachers from the outside. Now we are hiring teachers from people who have gone through the school system, went to the city, got a graduate degree, whatever, and then some of them have come back. And when they come back, this is an employment option. there is very few employment options in the villages. So in some sense, that is capacity. We have built capacity. We have teachers from the community now that we can hire. So the students who have gone through the system themselves are now coming back in. And I guess it's just not that, it's not as though we've been able to replace all the teachers with this. But one thing in Srinivasa, which has seen, I have to get the exact, I don't know the exact percentage of how many old students are the ones teaching now. It's probably roughly 30% or something, is my understanding. But the challenging part has been that the finances still have to come from elsewhere. So we have the capacity, let's say we're building up the capacity with these old students coming back, but we are not generated enough wealth in the community itself to basically support these teachers. So Asha is continuing to fund them, which is the other part of sustainability, right? Financial sustainability. So unless you actually have enough wealth in the community, I think that doesn't really happen. We just keep supporting. So anyway, so that was kind of what I wanted to share, that the two aspects to the financial sustainability and building capacity in the community. And like I'm delighted to have this discussion. I was hoping to have a good interactive discussion. And I think we all agree that the ideal goal is that we build enough capacity in the community that the NGOs should be able to withdraw. Now, we only talked about teacher capacity. We still didn't talk about school administrators and running a school itself, which I think I have not personally been involved with any effort on those lines. But that would be nice, right? Just imagine if you had a remote tribal village and an NGO was running a school, but after 20 years, the NGO can withdraw and Asha is directly supporting the community to run the school. That I think would be nice. You kind of, why do you need the NGO if you're able to build capacity? That would be nice. So something to think about when you're reviewing projects, which I think you all are. So the folks on this call, it's great to have this discussion. I think many of you are thinking about all of this. So there's a couple of summary thoughts. Is for the NGOs to be able to withdraw completely, I think you need interventions beyond education. Like I was talking about building economic, building up the economics of the community itself. So we had to have more money in the community. So in addition to capacity, you need to have more resources so that, let's say, I mean, that would be even nicer goal. Right? Not only the NGO withdraws from the tribal area, and you don't even need Asha to fund this tribal school. The tribals are running the school themselves using funds that they have within the community. That would be a nice goal. But for that, you need to really have the economic activity development going on. And like I was saying earlier, I don't think the NGOs we work with are really equipped to do that. One or two have done this well, but we're not equipped to do that. But I think having this as a vision and a goal is a good thing, right? Can we withdraw? Because NGOs also tend to fall into this thing about, oh yeah, we need to exist. We need to continually exist, and because we are there, right? We need to pay salaries, we need to do this. So to break away from that also is something to always kind of keep in mind. And for NGOs focused only on education, like Asha Boston has a project in UP, which is a school for girls for daughters of farmers in the area. And the school does a really good job because the girls would have no opportunity for education otherwise. They would drop out after primary or middle school. They would take care of everyone in the family. Then they would get married and take care of everyone in the husband's family. This has been the part of girls. And so the school provides a really good service. It not only helps them finish class 10 and class 12, it helps them go to various courses, find jobs elsewhere, and one or two of them actually come to the United States. So there is some kind of a exchange program that the embassies run, and they select students from around the world to come and spend a semester in a community college in the United States. So they conduct a test. In India, the American embassy conducts this test, and you have to take the test and then pass the test. And the school has helped the girls study for the test and pass the test, and two of them have actually come to the United States. We spoke to both of them. One of them came and spoke at one of our fundraisers, and it was hugely inspiring. I mean, from where she's come to where she's now, she's able to speak in front of an audience of 400 people at a fundraiser and talk about what education meant for her. They're so self-assured, they're so confident. So, I mean, the school is doing a good job from all those points of view. But it is completely focused on the school. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything. It's not looking at. And one of the things I'm annoyed with the school, I mean, annoyed meaning I would like them to do better, is to hire local teachers. They're not even worried about hiring local teachers. They are just focused on getting teachers from outside, and they requested more funds because they needed to pay higher salaries for the teachers they're getting in from outside. They had to provide an incentive for the teachers coming in from outside. And I kept telling them, work with a local teacher, but local graduates, find people locally. And what about the girls who passed out from this college? And they're not focused on any of that. Their focus is, I just want to get the best teachers possible. I'll spend the money, and I will focus on educating these girls. So the cost per child is pretty high, if you look at it like that. I mean, though they're doing a good job, the cost per child, yeah, they're only focused on the school, right? They're not focused on any economic activity in the area, none. So I think in those types of NGOs, I don't see any way you can NGO will ever withdraw, and Asha can withdraw only by identifying other funding sources. So I guess these are all the factors to keep in mind as you evaluate and work your projects, as I think you already are. So, okay, so that kind of brings me to, we're already at noon. Okay. End of what I wanted to say. So any other thoughts? This was a good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Melli. We have about 3 minutes, but I think we can go a little bit longer if there are questions, discussions.
Hey, I think I have 2 examples to share here. Again, Lisa from Danbury. So for the one in Mumbai, there are talks with a local college there. So this is a Sahyog Chehak Trust that that has multiple programs, but essentially, underprivileged children with disabilities. So they do have, they are in talks for tie-up with a local college where they could provide free college education to selected few with an understanding, a signed contract that once they are through their college education, they'll come back and serve as teachers for X number of years. So I think that will be interesting in terms of, teacher salary, quality of education, those women coming back, teaching with a greater level of engagement. So that's again ongoing. The second example that I wanted to share is for the one in Hyderabad. Again, that's a hearing impaired school. Right around the time when we started in 2014, and 2015, we got a request for supporting their early intervention school. So essentially that is, when you catch the kids at a later stage, hearing aids, cochlear implants, all of that stuff gets a little challenging because, when they can't hear, they can't speak. And so the earlier you catch them, the intervention, it just makes it easier. So, even on my visit this year, just a question made them respond saying, please don't think of, any other support. This is so valuable. And from what I could gather from that conversation is pretty much, you catch them at newborn to 2 years, put them through the preschool program. By the age of 5, the goal is to mainstream them into regular schools. This way, the number of students that actually attend all the way to 10th grade, we should start seeing a decrease there. So a handful of years, give them the training, look for donors for qualified students for cochlear implant surgeries or hearing aids, get to be more effective and move them out. So this way, the pressure on maintaining students all the way through 10th grade or the burden on this institute is decreased over the next few years. So again, that's an interesting model, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think both are very interesting models.
But sustainability, financial
Yeah.
burden on the organization. So these are all new, but I think we have an interesting journey ahead.
Indeed. So does it mean that people can? I wasn't. I guess I don't know enough about that, but so they are able to mainstream all students, even if the disability is severe.
Well, so if
Or at least many of
so the earlier, maybe 1 or 2 years, maybe 2014 and 15, we had done just providing hearing aids to the older kids, and so that school runs all the way through 10th grade because they just can't go out. They can't. Their speech is not clear. I've spoken to them. You can't really understand. But the younger kids, there is a lot of evidence out there saying you do it earlier, obviously, and it's common sense, right? I mean, once they start listening, their speech, as it's developing in the first 5 years, they're able to talk as well, and so then they could just be pushed out into regular schools. So average age of kids in that early intervention center, and the preschool is, 3, 4, some are maybe 6, 7, but I think it should improve as they start catching this early. But we are already seeing the difference. There were like about 20, this year there are 30 kids in there. So, but an innovative way of looking at it and planning for future.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Both examples.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, comments?
Actually, I'm going to throw one more in there. For the same school, which I thought again was a very smart move, it's a school for hearing impaired, but just in the last, less than 2 years, what they started doing is started including not that many, but maybe 3, 4 for a class of like 20, 25. They put in 2, 3, 4 underprivileged kids, normal speaking. Again, the thought behind that is children learn from each other. So while we are getting them, their hearing checkup and tie up with the local hospital to intervene and prescribe what is necessary at an early age, the underprivileged children who otherwise can't really afford, school, or their quality of education won't be good, is that they can speak normally, and so these kids will pick up from them to make this to make their learning curve more steep.
That's great.
That's all from me.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure. All right. Any other thoughts, questions from the rest of the team? Any sustainability ideas that you are seeing with your projects that you're stewarding or involved in? If not, thank you very much, Melli, on such short notice. Sorry for dropping the ball, but you pulled through the very last minute. Appreciate your time very much. And thank you everyone for joining in during the holidays. We'll have probably next in January, we're trying to get an external speaker. Otherwise, for now, we have Padmanava lined up, but we're also looking to get in external speakers. And we also encourage you to reach out to projects@ashanet.org if you can think of a topic to share or a speaker that we can host in these series. So thank you and have a good rest of your Sunday.